Has identity politics reared its head in the lead up to the 2019 federal election, or had it been there all along, but this time someone said what is usually kept behind closed doors? Hello and welcome to the Unpublished Cafe. I'm Ed Hand. On our last episode, we spoke to three pollsters about what they see on the horizon heading into the 2019 vote. For Burnaby South's Karen Wang, it's over before it started. Wang is a prominent young businesswoman in Burnaby, running a number of daycare centers. She emigrated to Canada from China in 1999. She is well known in the community of Burnaby and was selected by the Liberals to run in the Burnaby South by-election on February 25th. What heightened the profile of the by-election is that federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is running there as well to gain a seat in Parliament. He's been on the outside looking in when it came to question period. Needless to say, a lot of eyes would be on this campaign to gauge the strength of the NDP and the Liberal brands ahead of the October federal election. For those unfamiliar with Burnaby, about half the population is made up of immigrants, mostly from Asia. It was Wang's WeChat post that appealed to the Chinese-Canadian community in Burnaby that got her thrown overboard from the good ship Liberal. In her post, she points out she's of Chinese descent and Singh is of Indian descent. And by pointing out their heritage, Wang has been called a racist, forced out of the election, will not be given a second chance. Former MLA Richard Lee will now carry the Liberal banner for the 25th. Now, coming up on the Unpublished Cafe, we'll chat with Caroline Andrew. She's the director of the Centre on Governance at the University of Ottawa and an expert on Canadian politics. But first, we go to Burnaby, BC, and I'm pleased to be joined by Karen Wang. Now, Karen, I want to thank you for joining us. Politics is a blood sport, but did you think you'd be bloody from your own party?
Thank you for having me here today. And actually, from the post, I posted on WeChat. It's a social media for people, for like a Chinese Canadian community to communicate. Most of the people don't understand very much English, and so my understanding is my post was misunderstood and was taken out of context, and the English version created an incorrect impression that I was playing the race card. That was totally incorrect. So I'd like to explain later on.
All right. Now, what were you trying to say by you tell me if I'm going in the wrong direction here, all right? What were you trying to say by outlining the backgrounds of you as a Chinese Canadian and Jagmeet Singh of Indian descent?
Actually, the post was just an invitation for people to come out to attend the campaign office opening. It's for my own supporters. And actually, nowhere in the post did I mention people should vote for me because of my racial background. In the post, there is no single word mentioned. People should vote for me because of my racial background. Actually, here's what was actually said over there. And on the post, it was said, "Brothers and sisters, thank you for your help at the contested nomination on December 29th. We won the nomination, and I became the candidate. The Prime Minister has recently announced that Burnaby South by-election will be on February 25th. We have a one-in-a-lifetime winning opportunity in this election. There are more than 20,000 Chinese Canadian voters, equal to 40% of the voters in the riding. If we can increase the voting rate as the only Chinese Canadian candidate, we can win with 16,000 votes. Our votes can be decisive for this election, and we can make history. For this election, my real competitor is the NDP, South Asian Canadian candidate, Jagmeet Singh. And you will note that I point out Mr. Singh's cultural background with equal emphasis as his political affiliation. The subject of the sentence is Mr. Singh, not his cultural background."
Now, when you say, just going back in your statement a bit, you say we and 20,000 Chinese Canadians. Well, does that not try and separate the two?
No. Actually, when I mention about that, it's a state of the fact. In the writing, there is 20,000 Chinese Canadian voters, equal to 40% of the voters in the riding. That's the way how I was trying to motivate the supporters to come out to get engaged in my campaign team.
What message were you, I guess, trying to convey in this WeChat message? Is this I want your vote, or is this together we can make a difference?
What my message was, together, if we vote, we can make the difference. Our votes can be decisive for this election. Because, historically, according to the record, and the Chinese Canadian community normally has a low voting turnout in the election. And so that, I was trying to motivate the people and encourage people to get involved in politics and to get engaged in my campaign. So that's my intention.
So traditionally in Burnaby South, the Chinese Canadian community has a low voter turnout then. And this was a direct appeal to them. Yeah, comparing with the average. Right. It's a low turnout. Now, you put this out on WeChat, and that's a Chinese social media, Chinese social media forum. Now, I'm wondering, when you look at something like that, is it used directly to appeal to certain people, or were you trying to get it to everybody? And in this case, too. No, it's only to my own supporters who helped me win the nomination. And those people are living in the riding. And, they voted for me to win the nomination. So that's my audience. It's just, it was sent to only those people. It's my own supporters. And because other people, and so it's what to see. That's what I heard from actually when I gave out the invitation. And the campaign office was asking me, they said, you should invite your people who voted for you at the contested nomination to come and join us and to celebrate. At the same time, I didn't get a chance to say thank you to them. So it will be a good opportunity to say thank you to them. Karen Wang is joining us on the Unpublished Cafe. She's the former Liberal candidate in Burnaby South, who has been replaced by Richard Lee. Now, back to WeChat here for a second. Obviously, that's, as I mentioned, Chinese social media forum. Do you think possibly the translation could have been an issue here?
Exactly. Actually, from the beginning, as I said, my post was misinterpreted, and people got misinformed and misguided. So that causes a misunderstanding over here. And so the English translation and the Chinese post, it's just, totally different. And people have the impression that I was trying to play the race card. Actually, that's not my intention at all.
Let's go back a bit from when you won the nomination to carry the Liberal banner into this by-election. And did you get much support from the Liberal Party after you won that nomination? Maybe some, whether it be financial help, whether it would be some extra people in the office to help you out. Did you get any support from the Liberals here?
I do have and they've been helping me around. So it's, from my observation, I think I do have, support. Campaign team over there. So, yeah. So, but they didn't really give me a training about the Chinese like a WeChat post. Probably one reason is because of the language issue, and not many people in the campaign team really understand the language. So that's what happened.
I'm wondering, and we can talk about this whole situation where it seems that it was almost identity politics or playing the race card, which you've obviously said you're not. And when I'm looking at this situation politically, do you think you might have got better traction if you pointed out that Singh was being parachuted in from Ontario as opposed to perhaps, what his background is?
I actually am still new to politics, and for this, I believe each party has their own best interest of sending people to writing, and for my campaign that time was on my strong connection with the community because myself is an immigrant. I came to Canada 20 years ago with my husband under the highly trained manpower program from China with nothing. And I landed in Burnaby South, and I raised my family in Burnaby South. And I went to school in Burnaby South, and I set up my own daycare business in Burnaby South. And last year, I ran for MLA in Burnaby South as well. So I worked so hard last year for the provincial election. I knocked on over 7,500 houses. So that's my focus. Now, during the campaign,
you had tendered your resignation, and then you went back and you asked for a second chance. You were turned down. But what reasons were you given by the Liberals to not give you a second chance?
It is because after I resigned from, I resigned for my candidacy, and I just realized from the news, according to from the statement, Liberal Party gave to public, and they said I resigned because I have to resign. Something like they said Liberal Party's belief or Liberal Party's policy. My comment in the WeChat post does not match the Liberal Party's policy, which I disagree with. So that's why I said because I believe the party is misguided and misinformed because of the misinterpretation of the language. So I'd like to give the party a second consideration and see, people misunderstood, and I understand this. So I would like to let the party reconsider my candidacy. So that's why I called for a media conference and, was trying to ask the second chance to run.
Why did you decide to run for the Liberals in the first place? I understand you also tried to seek the Conservative nomination.
Early last year, I got approached by both parties. It's what you see after I did study on both parties' policies. I choose Federal Liberal Party because of the policies. Especially for Liberal Party, I strongly believe in liberty, equality, diversity, multiculturalism, compassion, national unity, and speech freedom, religious freedom, and democracy. And all those makes me, choose a Federal Liberal Party.
Well, have you considered running as an independent then?
That time after at the media conference, people were asking, and I didn't really have time to think about it. And now, because I am 3 months pregnant, so I'm not a candidate anymore, and I would rather focus on the family and the daycare business and nonprofit and charities activities and performing for the seniors.
Will you be seeking any legal action against the Liberals?
Not for now. I still strongly believe in the Liberal Party's policy, and of course I feel disappointed about their decision. It's nobody's fault. It's caused by the misinterpretation, and because the language translations and so that made people misguided and misinformed, and people misunderstood me.
Will you consider politics again?
Um, it's what you see. It will depend, right? And so I won't restrict anything for my life because I grew up in a village in China, and when I came to Canada as an immigrant 20 years ago, we borrowed money to buy air tickets to fly to Canada. This is how we started, and we are so grateful for this country. And right now, I have about 20 people, like my extended family, all living in the community. And this country is so inclusive, and they accept us. And it doesn't matter what background you have, what language you speak, and what religion you believe in, and where you came from. And this country accepts you, includes you, values you, and respect you, and give you an equal opportunity to work hard and be successful and treat people as equal individual. So we love this country. We are so proud of being a Canadian. And what I am thinking all the time is, as long as I can, I will give back and I will contribute to our community. So, the difficulties I went through won't stop me from serving the community, continuously. And politics is not the only way for me to give back. So, and there are lots of ways, like, for example, serving the community by opening, more daycares. And people know in Burnaby, the daycare is in crisis. So we don't have enough spots, and people have long waiting list, and it's costly. My goal of setting up daycares is to provide quality, accessible, and affordable childcare programs to the families. And this is the way to give back because, at the same time I create jobs. I have 9 teachers working with me here, and we pay tax to the government. So it's a way to give back. And also, I am a Chinese opera performer. I landed when I was very little from the from my family. And so I consider using my music as a way to give back as well. So since my sisters came here, she is a national class Chinese opera artist, and we have organized a nonprofit performing group, and we have been visiting senior homes, senior centers regularly. So this is the way to give back as well, and we want to make sure our seniors are taken good care of, and they have already contributed so much to the community. Now it's our turn to look after them.
Karen, I want to thank you for joining us on the Unpublished Cafe.
Thank you. You have a great day.
And you as well. Karen Wang is the former Liberal candidate in Burnaby South who was forced out after a controversial social media post. Is this a case of identity politics, or is this, as some say, political correctness run amok? Has Wang been vilified for pointing out the cultural differences between her and Singh, or is she just saying what all political parties do, but they never say it out loud? And to get some more perspective on that, I am pleased to be joined this morning by Caroline Andrew, Director of the Centre of Governance at the University of Ottawa. And Caroline, first off, do you feel what Wang posted was racist?
Well, I think you were right to say that this is something that's always gone on. I think she was, was identity politics, and I think, she was mostly in error in sending it to a list that she thought was a private list. And I think she was, what struck me as kind of unnecessary, and is because her writing is very heavily not born in Canada or recent immigrants, and by far the largest number are those of Chinese descent. So it was sort of unnecessary in a way. She was going to win the constituency, and what it ended up being is her having to leave and them getting somebody else. I think the interesting thing is all the is also not only the local level, but the sort of whole political level, because I think that in fact the Liberal Party, federal Liberal Party, was really hoping that the NDP would win the race, because they thought he was the most, probably the least popular leader of the NDP, and so that might help them in the federal election, because more people might vote for the Liberals rather than voting for the NDP. So I think there was sort of a two-sided vision from the federal government. They were sorry to lose her, but they weren't all that unhappy that she stepped down, and he would likely win the by-election. And for the Liberal Party, that's a good thing. But I think it's clear that the kind of ethnic mentions have always existed in Canadian politics. Well, we could go back to the whole question of the Aboriginal population, for which their exclusion, and they're now some people trying to make up for it, has existed for a long, long time. As we know, the federal immigration law was clearly racist until just after the Second World War, where we had a white immigration policy, and it was only when we absolutely needed workers to come and fill out the industries that we hoped were going to be growing after the Second World War, that we began to think, we better have some Portuguese bricklayers, or we needed some Italian people who would make better food than we were doing at the time. So I think that we have to remember how long that list that existed in Canadian law. It was really only fairly much after the Second World War that we began to see that we wanted a lot more people for industrial reasons, and we needed them from where they wanted to come from. So it started from Europe, and then it went a bit further, and then it started to go even to then there were the Vietnamese and the boat people, and then there's many, many more. And I think the only thing that's changed in a way is the role of public opinion has changed, and especially, and that's your domain, not mine, this kind of social media and the visualization of cases that are important, because as we all know, certainly in Canada, the Vietnamese boat people were a huge rallying cry for Marion Dewar, who said we need to bring them here. And the French also, this wonderful film about the French who went out to get boat people too. And so we began to think of ourselves as heroes and them as poor people who needed a better home. And I think that began to change the vision we had of ourselves. But certainly that's still quite recent, that we began to think that we needed, and we began to realize that we needed more people to do all kinds of things that Canadians didn't particularly like to do. So I think that also works. So it's I think it's a really interesting story, this one, but I think it follows a long line of Canadian politics and being only moved. And in a way, what's interesting now, and as I said, that's your domain, is how things get changed when people see visual evidence of somebody in need of being helped. And so I think what this one shows is that in a way she was, the Liberal candidate was I think, just being silly. She knew she was going to win, but I think what she didn't realize, of course, is in the digital age, everybody has access to everybody's confidential emails, and she thought she was only, that she was only doing it to people she knew well. But of course, one of them, for whatever reason we don't know, decided to spill it to the press and say that, and of course, then she had to resign, and probably for her, that's well, of course, she's now lost out and will have to do other things. But I think that it really indicates to me a long, long history. And what has changed is the digital age and the age of photographing, because we never could do that. We couldn't when we did the residential schools and did things like that. There was nobody photographing, or except in black and white.
Right.
But now the whole world sees, and probably the best example recently was the boy on the beach, where Canadian public opinion was running relatively anti-Syrian immigration. And the day that photograph showed, it switched 150 degrees, and everyone in Canada wanted to get that family, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a long tradition, and and what this one shows is how it's such a political issue, both back and forth. Who's going to benefit from it? The individual candidates get a bit pushed around by by provincial elections, federal elections, and municipal elections. We all know from the recent controversies in Toronto and with the Ontario government. But the individual candidates are relatively small pawns in the world of municipal, big city, especially big city government, provincial government, and federal elections, which are all working to try and position themselves in the best way possible to the Canadian electorate.
Caroline Andrew is joining us on the Unpublished Cafe, director at the Centre on Governance at the University of Ottawa, as we talk about identity politics and, in particular, the Karen Wang situation in Burnaby South. In terms of Karen, all she did really is she pointed out the basic cultural differences, saying she was Chinese Canadian and Singh was of Indian descent. At that point, I'm wondering, because it was on WeChat, and that's a Chinese social media forum, I'm wondering if perhaps the translation of what she said going to English could have been misinterpreted, misread, that kind of a situation.
I'm sure that must be partially true. I mean, most of us, certainly nobody outside the Chinese community, or very few people, speak fluent Chinese. I know one or two people, but that's all. And so it could be that she was, just pointing out a sort of a category, a difference in categories. But I think what she didn't think of, and that was maybe silly of her, but it certainly had consequences for her, is that she didn't realize that somebody would immediately present it in a different way, in a more public way. And then, of course, she had to resign. And with all the repercussions of different levels of government about this one. And, of course, we're feeling in a sensitive mood right now because the Ontario government has been so clear about about cutting things to francophones. So everybody's in a sort of a more sensitive moment about the French-English distinction, and of course then all other kinds of distinctions that are important or not important in Canadian politics.
When we look at the situation of identity politics, I think the most blatant form of seeing it, or the complaint about it, I think back to the 95 referendum with Jacques Parizeau, when they came out on the losing end, blamed it all on the money and the ethnic vote. And then, in the Harper government, we even we heard that they were targeting certain ethnic enclaves to try and bring them into the conservative tent. So really, I'm wondering, like, why is it that this is so upsetting for the Liberals when it's been around forever?
Yeah, no, I think it, I would say it wasn't so upsetting to the Liberals. In fact, it, in a way, probably served their cause because, as I say, they want Jagmeet Singh to win. So it was probably, they were probably a bit saying how offensive this was, but really very pleased that that was going to help the person they thought would help them in the upcoming election. So it's all about electoral politics. And as we know, Canadians, well, we all were brought up on the story of Sir John A. Macdonald telegraphing, saying, "Send me another 10,000." We certainly got a history of being able to live with political corruption, but we're getting better. We are getting better at that. We're getting a little bit more rules about that. But I think it does connect to the interfederal provincial dimension, the language dimensions, the regional dimensions that make up the basic politics of this country. And so not the victim, but the person who loses out in this is of course, the first candidate who's now has no immediate political future. But it does point out the very strong strain we've always had about identifying different kinds of identity in every form of politics.
Do you think Singh's the big winner here now with all the publicity surrounding this by-election? And obviously he needs us to get in. This is the publicity. He's half a country away from his hometown. Do you think he's the big winner here?
I think he is, and I think the federal Liberal Party is. I think he is in the immediate sense. He probably will win, and he probably will do okay. And of course, if what the Liberals hope is that the NDP will get enough seats to be at least diminish the conservative number of seats. So I think he's a winner in the short term. The Liberals are a winner in sort of the medium term, and we voters are, as usual, a bit confused about who we're going to vote for anyways.
Well, thank goodness we have until October to make that decision.
Yes, we've got a bit of time, and we'll be able to listen to you and read newspapers and try and figure things out.
Caroline, I want to thank you for joining us.
Well, a pleasure as always, Ed.
Caroline Andrew, Director of the Centre on Governance at the University of Ottawa. And now it's time for you to weigh in. You've heard directly from Karen Wang, who has been branded a racist for her comments on WeChat. She has pointed out that the translation of her post did not come out well. So here's the question for you. Do you feel Karen Wang's social media post was racist, or do you feel the Liberals cut her loose because it portrayed them as playing identity politics? You can have your say by logging on to unpublished.vote and have your say. I want to thank Caroline Andrew at the University of Ottawa for joining us, as well as Karen Wang, the former Liberal candidate in Burnaby South. And thank you for listening to the Unpublished Cafe. I'm Ed Hand.